Well, hello, friends, and welcome to From Busy to Rich, the podcast where we help financial advisors grow their businesses beyond the products they sell and the assets they manage, increase profitability, and reclaim their time by providing strategies and insights that will not only change your life, but practice. Today, I'm super excited. It's going to be a fun and unique show. We've had a number of questions come in just over the years, some of them frequently asked, and I just thought a better way to create some response and answer those was really just to put Wes in the hot seat. So that's what we're going to do today. Wes is going to be in the hot seat, and we're just going to be answering live some new questions that have come in and get some of his feedback and then have a fun dialogue around it. So Wes, with that, I hope you're ready. We've got some great ones teed up here. Number one, I think this is a good starting place is just because we talk a lot about fee-based planning. Let's start at kind of at the beginning there. When you transitioned to fee-based planning model and had to make those new evolutions and steps, I imagine there was a learning curve. And one of the questions that came in is, what are some of the biggest obstacles just to get going? And then as you've learned and grew.
Yeah, I love the question because it is one of those that come up often, Justin. I think there's several things I want to hit on here. I think one is the biggest obstacle, the number one biggest obstacle is your own head trash, your own mind. Because when people begin this journey, here's what it's typically looked like, at least it did for me, is I did a whole lot of work for free for the privilege of placing the product or managing the money. And depending on if you came in through a large insurance company or you came in through a wirehouse where you gathered a bunch of assets, or you've kind of commingled the two where you're doing a little bit of both because it feels more holistic. You did a bunch of stuff and you felt like you were doing really good work. Maybe even considered yourself a holistic advice and guidance person, a holistic planner. So the idea that people were going to get to pay you for what you were doing for free in your head, in my head at the time, was just a big leap in my mind. Now I knew what gave me confidence is it wasn't like this didn't exist, right? People were charging independent of the products they place and independent of the money they manage, just like we do. So what I had to do is get out of my own way in my own head to say, look, this is being done. And I think hit the point where I discerned there is a different value for being paid for how you think and paid for your advice, in addition to managing money and placing product. Those things are really important and you need to be great at it, but they're table stakes. Whereas a process that first and foremost gets people to lean into how you think and gives them examples of how you think and already demonstrates a lot of value in the interaction that they're having with you initially. That is the jumping off point, is understanding that when you're charging for your advice, you become better at delivering value with advice. And so I remember the very first fees that we ever charged were very small. It was like $1,000 or $1,500 or something like that. And I was just happy because they said, I couldn't believe they said yes. I was like, oh my gosh. And then quickly realized that the juice has to be worth the squeeze on these things, because you are a different offer and you begin to follow a process. That's the other thing, a process that causes people to lean into planning. And then as a byproduct of that process, they're still going to do the AUM and they're still going to have you. So they'll have you manage money and they'll have you place products, but it is your mind. It's discovering that there is a difference between a plan and planning. That one is, that plan that I remember at first you'd go to the usually theory-based schools that are like, they have a boot camp at the organization that I initially got exposed to it. And that boot camp was all about, hey, so here's the plan that you'll deliver. And the value is all about this document. And the plan is only valuable if it's proof the planning process is taking place. The planning process is all about helping people understand, where are you relative to the future that you're trying to create? Where are you financially? Where are you in a family standpoint? Where are you from a profession? And what is the unlived life within you that is exciting that you want to move towards? And understanding that, and then in light of that, being able to have very valuable conversations about what areas of planning may be most valuable to what they're trying to accomplish to move them between those 2 points. So it's what when we teach transform, this is the mind shift we're trying to get advisors to latch onto. And here's a couple of hurdles that will pop up in the process as they're looking at it. Because when you take a client through our location phase, which is like you can't get where you want to go until you first understand where you are relative to where you're trying to go. And then you've gotten all this data, you've gotten kind of the lay of the land, maybe a lot of the things you would normally do in a fact-finding conversation if you were product-based or asset-based or both. And then you have that meeting where you're talking about these areas of planning, but what you're looking at, because your mind, it lived there, is look at all the commission on the table. Look at all the assets that we could bring in and manage. And if I say that there's a fee, a barrier to entry, before I do those things, am I gonna leave a bunch on the table? Because people who have not made a living by charging a fee and simply managing products or placing products or managing money, they are constantly looking at that scary thing of what if they say no to the fee and I don't get to do any of it. And what I found, and you guys can hitchhike on my faith and experience in this, is that if they say no after you take them through the process that we take our initial prospective clients through, that location expectation phase, that is not a client we want to work with anyway, because if they don't value the conversation that we teach you to have, that where people are like, I am excited to pay for this advice, and I'll still let them manage money, and I'll still let them place product, then the kind of client you have is not a great client. So we constantly are in the state of our own heads. And so just getting out of your own way. I'd say the second area is making sure you do have a good process to where it's not just you are starting to charge for the same thing you used to do. Because it's not that. It's truly guiding a conversation where meaningful financial planning is about the alignment of the use of capital, that capital being the time, talent, energy, attention, relationships, with what they really care about. So you are taking them through a different experience. And I know there's people that have not been on the other side of that hill, that are on this side of the hill, that they're going, but what is it? What is different about it? Well, that's one of the reasons we teach Transform. That's what we show you that. And that's what a lot of our podcasts are about. And it's why right now, every week, we probably average 2 a week, people knocking on our door to say, hey, you did this for Justin. I would love to meet with you to see if we can work together. Very different from when we were going around knocking on other people's doors saying, hey, do you want to come over to my house? Do you want to come over to my house and sit in the living room and I can tell you about what we cook for dinner? And then if you like it, then we'll cook dinner. This is hey, I already think I like your food because you served Justin a great meal. I would love it to come sit in your living room and you tell me more about what that's like. And I'm already kind of ready to like taste the food. So just walk me through that process. But it is the process that drives that. So those are some like simple things that I think about. And so if you're nervous because you're looking at the commission that's on the table or the money you could manage, that's normal. And it's not going to go anywhere until you get some reps with people saying yes. But the way you're going to get reps with people saying yes is don't just try and say, I'm going to start charging a fee for the same thing I've been doing. It needs to be a uniquely different process. And when you get to observe one, like we teach, you just realize pretty quickly, wow, this is a different client experience. And so those are the ways I would think about answering that question.
Oh, that's great. You keyed on, I mean, there's a ton there. There's a couple of things I really want to point out is you just mentioned independent of, you said that several times, right? Like the planning fee, part of the process, that component is independent of assets we manage and or products that are placed, because that does happen too. It's just a natural part of the process in the planning thing. So this next question goes to the other end of that extreme. And because some of the advisors that we speak with, they charge a planning fee, but they say it's through the AUM, it's through the assets they manage. So I guess the question there was, since you charge for do you charge for a separate AUM, which is a separate fee for AUM, which is yes, but how do you justify that?
Yeah. So where I go with it again is a mind shift. So most of the people that I've talked to that are saying something similar to that, Justin, where it's like, oh yeah, no, we do planning, and do you charge a fee for that? Yeah, yeah, I wrap it into my AUM. That's an asset management fee. That's not a planning fee. And now you may do some planning because you're just trying to be valuable and not have the client move their money to someone else. And you may actually have a lot of great attributes there. But my experience, and again, I'm just speaking from all of the people, the hundreds, if not thousands of advisors that I've spoken to over time about this. When I see what they're doing, it is not what we're doing. It is not this holistic financial planning process that really people are excited to pay that fee, independent of if you ever manage a dollar of money, which you will, or place a product. So it's not the same thing, and the mind shift hasn't happened if indeed you're not doing that. Because when you do this well, you're going to recognize, wow, this, in addition to and yes, we still manage a lot of money, and we feel like we're good at it. We've got a process for it. We place product, and we feel like we're really good at that. We have deep expertise in it, and that is a byproduct of the planning. But it is not where we're paid for the planning. We're paid when that client is all in and agrees to write us a check up front to engage in the planning process. So yeah, I think that it's not the same. And when I walk through how they're actually doing it, I observe clearly that the experience a client would have with us, charging them a fee versus them saying, "Oh no, I do planning too. I just don't charge you for it because or they basically deceive themselves. They say, "Yeah, I charge it because I wrap it into my." No, that means you don't charge it. It means that you manage money and you get paid a fee for that. And maybe you're trying to be more valuable than the other, you know, thousands of advisors out there that also manage money by being a little smarter and being able to come up with some unique, fun ideas.
Yeah, I love that. And I think if there's an honesty in the discussion about the approach, right? You can only spend so much time on things that, that don't grow your business before you run out of business. So, and if you're only doing it within the AUM, there's a lot of components that we do that we're able to do and dive into a deeper level.
Yeah.
That just without that component, you can't. So the next question goes a little further into like when we're actually with clients, and actually as early on as our what we call the expectation phase meeting, because we talk about this area a lot. It's one of the areas that we've even had other episodes on about just such an untapped area of opportunity for advisors in growing their intelligence around this to be able to have smart conversations. And that is on the creative planning in the world of taxes. In the advisory world, it seems like that's one of those places that we shy away from a lot out of just unnecessary fear or concern. But I know there's smart ways to talk about it. So how would you answer to somebody? This is one of the questions. How do you talk about all these tax strategies when you're not a CPA? And then the part two of that is, how did you learn about all that stuff?
Yeah. So years ago, this really, in a planning session with one of our coaches, this really just screamed so loud to me, as this is a massive area of opportunity. It's a game most advisors are not playing or even aware is really being played at any level. Because if you think about it, in taxes in general, the tax system for our clients becomes one of the largest single expenses that they have in their P&L. It is one of the largest reducers of profit that they have in their P&L. And we're talking about, before, if we don't even throw in state income tax or payroll tax, just think about general income tax. In Texas, we don't have a state income tax, but it's 37% before money ever hits any kind of investment. If I know enough, if I'm tax intelligent enough to be able to observe common areas and similar fact patterns, that I can say, hey, if you pull these 8 levers, we can repurpose a lot of money back to your retained earnings that right now are unnecessarily going away to the IRS. And it has nothing to do necessarily with a product that I can put in place or an asset that I can manage. Most advisors are somewhat aware of, oh, if you do this kind of investment, you get a tax deduction. And that's great. You need to know those things. But there are way more tax deductions out there that have nothing to do with products or assets that we manage. But there are still, if you're a holistic advisor, holistic means what is interrupting the unlived life within this client? How are they living today? What's unlived within them? And when I observe a massive tax bill and there's a lot of just levers that aren't being pulled, It is an immediate area of alert for me because it's such a big game changer. And this for us has to be one of the largest areas of referral that we get. And by referral, when I say that, I don't mean we're asking for it. I mean, somewhere our clients are talking about the stuff we're doing for them with their friends who are a lot like them. And their friends are calling us going, I've never heard about these things before. They told me you're the one who told them. Can we talk? And I'm like, yeah. And so we do holistic planning. So the second part of your question is like, okay, where do you go to learn it? Like, do I need to go become a CPA? And the answer to that is of course no. In fact, that may be produce negative outcomes depending on, because most CPAs, they live in the world of tax preparation. And so it's, here comes April, here comes October, and it's going to be compliant, and they're going to take the data you give them and plug it in and on time, hopefully for most of them, if they're minimally competent. But what they don't do is a lot of proactive tax planning. It's not like they can't answer your questions, but they're not certainly saying, hey, let's talk about everything you got going on in your life. And are there levers that could be pulled that would benefit you based on how you're living or how you could live that you're not pulling? And so where we grew our tax intelligence is really a few places. So one is just if the only thing our listeners do is go to my friend Mike Jezishek's podcast, the Small Business Tax Savings Podcast, and listen every week, within 3 months, you're going to be far more tax intelligent than most people on the planet. Within a year, that knowledge is going to have compounded because every week you're exposing yourself to different things about the tax code that could benefit your clients that maybe have nothing to do with the product that you can put in place or assets you can manage, but it's still going to create excess revenue that was going away. It's creating new profit. And if it's a holistic planner, if my role is to help people increase profitability and quality of life, the taxes are a great way to do that. The other thing that I would say is use Claude AI, Claude.ai. If you have questions about like a tax question or how a strategy might be utilized, you speak it into Claude AI or type it in however you want to do it, and it's going to do a pretty good job of giving you a nice concise answer. And then you can say, hey, cite your sources. I'd like to know, where did this come from? Because I don't want it just to be the only source be TikTok, right? I want it to say, now TikTok can have some pretty cool ideas too, but you got to ground it, right? Ground it. Where is that at in the tax code? Where is it? How's it been litigated out? And another great tool that we use that I would recommend every advisor jump on the bandwagon of this is Holistiplan. So Holistiplan is a great tax software. You can literally if you have a PDF document of the client's tax return, upload that in a Holistiplan. It's going to spit out a nice report that summarizes the client's personal tax return only, so not business. And it's going to start giving you a bunch of low-hanging fruit ideas. Now, again, you want to go deeper and you want to really learn how does that mesh up with me actually reading the tax return? So put yours in there and look at that Holistiplan. Another area is we created a tool called the Narratives Checklist. So there's hundreds of great planning strategies, ideas out there, hundreds of thousands of combinations of them. What we've done is kind of, if you imagine like a sommelier that has a deep wine cellar, they curate it, they organize it. And then when you start talking about your situation and what you like, what you don't like, they immediately, that catalog of thousands goes down to hundreds. And then you start talking about different things about your uniqueness and they go, well, maybe these 5. And then actually, I think this one would be the best idea for you to put in here and maybe try this one next time. So with a curated list, we want a big part of that list is tax ideas. Okay, a lot of other ideas too, as it relates to like increasing the velocity of your family bank and how to unlock generational opportunities. But a ton of them are just tax ideas. You go down them, it's bulleted. And then if you don't really know that idea, you can either do one of two things. You can click it and it'll be me explaining the idea to you and how I would explain it to a client and why clients would use it. Or you can also go take that idea and search it on the internet, search it on YouTube, search it in Claude AI, and you're going to get smarter at these ideas. Now, again, always ground it. One other resource that I'll mention is the Bradford Tax Institute. It has a great treasure trove of tax ideas and he puts out a newsletter. If you're a subscriber, it's super cheap to be a part of it. Third thing or last thing I'd say on that for getting yourself like wise in tax intelligent is be a part of Mike Jesichek's community and Tax Elm, where you get access to a library of ideas and education that you can continue to use. I would say this because I know we got a lot of different kinds of listeners out there. The inspiration is truly the deadline on these things. So you get good at tax ideas when they happen to apply to a client, you need to learn it. So you need to be learning all the time. But some people are like, well, I need to read the code. I need to read the tax code. Yeah, try that out. That's 80,000 pages, depending on the font size. And a lot of it just is not very usable or applicable. But when you have a curated list to start from, start there. Start there. We give that away to everybody that's enrolled in our Transform community. And so those are ideas we're using real time, and it's always getting updated and added to with clients.
Yeah, it's great. It's really more like you need to know add tools to the toolbox so that you know which ones to pull out in the right situations as they define and describe things. And I do want to provide some clarification. We're not the ones making the tax recommendations. It's identifying the tax opportunities that we're seeing based on what the tax code says, because that's very clear, what those opportunities could be, and then coordinating with the CPA like a hero team combination to come in and help deliver on what those things were identified as.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be the subject matter expert, but you have to have the tax intelligence to know, hey, this is probably something we should consider and discuss with your CPA.
And patterns emerge, Justin. So you get a client type, and you're like, this one looks a lot like the other four that I worked with. So these base level ideas should absolutely apply. Tell me if there's a reason they shouldn't. And then what specialty ideas? That's why there's the list. Our list is like stuff that we use 90% of the time. And then we've got all those 10% ideas on there as well that they're not going to be there most of the time, but boy, when they show up, they're big.
Absolutely. So I'm going to switch gears on you a little bit and throw in another random one here. But the team we're a part of now, especially more recently as we've grown, we're almost 20 people. And at one point, it was just you. You were the one-man band, as you've talked about before.
Yeah.
I guess from start to now, how have you learned to identify next hires in that process? Like how did you figure out who to hire first when you were one person, but now at 20 people, as you're looking forward towards the future, how are you figuring out and identifying what's that next role, what's the next person that needs to come in order to support our growing environment and team here?
Yeah, I love this question because a lot of times when we're like telling advisors all the things we do and all the people that do different things on our team, which is all across the country. We're a completely remote team. We're also, we have clients that are all across the country because we operate predominantly remotely. When they see that, they're like, oh my gosh, it's so many. I mean, where do I even start? And remember, I started, it was just me, there was no people and no money to go hire people. And so, and I didn't have a blank check, and I was getting better. I was learning the process, but I love backing into that from an org chart perspective. And so for those of you that are watching, I'm going to bring up an org chart. And this org chart, and I'll try and paint a verbal tapestry for those of you who are just listening, but you can check this out on YouTube because we post the podcast there as well. So in every organization, there exists that's doing holistic work, and even those that are doing compartmentalized or transactional work, there exists some version of what I'm showing on the screen right now. Okay, you've got a CEO of the company who sets the vision, mission, long-term strategy, decides on corporate initiatives and changes, driving those initiatives and identifying growth opportunities. You also have some form of financial controller or human resources. And that's who might administer your payroll, who might do your accounting, your bookkeeping, who might deal with administration of benefits if you have those. Then you have from the operational side of the company, you have a lead advisor, and that lead advisor's predominant highest and best use is going to be to meet with clients, to drive clients' planning through. So to say, hey, here's where you are. Here's where it sounds like it matters to you. Here are the areas we're going to focus on. Here's specifically the path we're going to walk for you. And and then they're going to make sure that we all agree upon that direction. It's really a relationship cultivation role. Then closely connected to that would be a project manager. Project manager, they're in all the client meetings. They prepare, the meeting notes after the meetings. They disseminate all that comes out of those meetings into tasks and make sure that who's doing what. They do, in our case, we call them strategy summaries. What's in progress, what's upcoming, and what's on hold. And making sure, if you imagine like a general contractor, they don't build the house, right? They don't decide what house is going to be built, but they make sure the house project is getting managed to execution, that a house will get built, because they're saying, all right, what's next? What house are we building? What's next? What's in progress right now? Who's doing what? Who's dragging their feet? What's upcoming? Who do I need to stage next? And what's on hold until these things get done? Then you have a paraplanner. Paraplanner role is like they are not necessarily in the client meetings. They're assimilating data. They're creating reports. They're creating whatever it is you like to use to talk to clients about what you do. They're preparing the people in the meeting for those meetings, predominantly, making sure they've got all the right materials to do what they need to do. And so just right there, before I move any further, if you don't have all those, you are those, right? You're the paraplanner, project manager, lead advisor. But understanding they are distinctly different roles, they all talk and dance and connect. Then you've got an executive assistant role, and that one's one who can schedule appointments, manage your calendar, make sure any licensing that you need is done and compliance stuff's done. They may lead team meetings, manage some team commitments, who's supposed to be doing what, and any special projects that you need taken care of, like travel or things like that. And then director of service and new business. That role is they handle everything to do with financial planning agreements that need to be executed or renewed, insurance underwriting that needs to be, applications that need to be electronically signed and set up, and that the medical got scheduled if it needs a medical, that doctor's records got in, that thing is getting to the place where we can place it formally with the client, and that it gets placed and gets funded, and then it gets renewed. And is there any things that need to be fixed with, like, did their address change? Do they need to change beneficiaries? All those things that come out of that. And then if you manage money, a director of AUM, and they're the ones who, in our case, make sure that accounts get set up. Money gets pulled into those accounts. Money gets sent out of those accounts. The securities backline of credit, if that's relevant, gets set up around it. Shifts in who the managers we're using are. If you're building them yourself, that's a whole different thing. We don't do that. We use good managers, and we track performance, all of them, and replace them when they need to be replaced, or upgrade when we feel like there's a better option out there. So they do all that. So if you think about this, day one, my name was in all these boxes, and I'm not good at a lot of stuff on here.
Yeah, we all know your favorites, that director of service and new business.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Or the executive assistant role. I'm incredible at that. Not at all. So when I was first hiring, a great question to ask, and I messed this up, guys, when I was doing it. If I had this now, it would have put me years in advance. What was the best hire? Was it to go get a project manager? It wasn't. Not day one. It was to go get a good executive assistant combination director of service and new business. Like, I could hire one person, and I needed them to be able to be pretty good at both of those things. And so if you're a solo practitioner, I'm just going to tell you, I recommend that's the role you're looking for. Executive assistant, director of new business. Now, if you do have somebody that's playing that role, maybe it's, hey, I want to split those roles out. Because for me, that's the next way it happened, is I said, hey, I need a executive assistant that can also kind of help me with the paraplanner role. And if we could have a whole dedicated person to director of service and new business. And that's the way we did it. So a lot of these early hires, they're kind of hybrids, right? You just don't want to leave them there if you're going to continue to grow very long. And then we hired a executive assistant, and I had just a paraplanner project manager. So somebody started coming to my meetings with me and able to handle all a lot of, anyway, the management of those things. And then we further split that. We split it. Hey, I'm going to have a dedicated project manager / lead advisor, somebody that I don't have to be in all the meetings. They can actually lead many of the meetings that I'm in through our associate financial advisors. They do all that, and they're in my meetings to help manage the projects for those clients that because I want to do as little of that as possible, because my highest and best use is to be the lead advisor and then have great people that can implement everything else. And then eventually we added a director of AUM, because I kind of had this director of service new business kind of playing a little bit of that role, but it really became large enough to where we needed to split it out. Then the fun part here is that the song just keeps going on. It's like I can for a long time continue to grow this model by adding new lead advisor project managers that eventually have their own project manager paraplanner. And that paraplanner can grow from paraplanner to project manager, and project manager to lead advisor. So we're always kind of observing where are we organizationally, and we're always looking for good talent. We're always looking for people who could play any of these roles, because we can continue to expand this to whatever we want. So I'll stop there. I said a whole bunch, Justin. Thoughts or questions on that?
Yeah, I guess just one. I mean, it's all good and well, right, in theory, but you can't. None of us can act like it's always done perfectly. There's only so much you can know on the front end. So, and you mentioned it's a song that you sing. Well, if you listen to country song for any length of time, a lot of those are about she took the dog, she took the house, she took the truck, right? Like so.
Sure.
So, at some point, I assume there was probably somebody didn't work out. So, have you had to fire anybody? And I guess talk really quick what that looked like.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you bring that up, Justin, because this is going to be a hard conversation that we need to have today. No, I'm just kidding. Um, I think there's two things there. I think one is hiring well will prevent you from having to fire many, if any, people. Hiring well is making sure you're not just throwing bodies into an organization. Does this person, are they equipped to do what you're asking? And there's a couple of ways we think about this. One is, if you're going to go hire a director of service and new business and executive assistant, I would just caution you, do not go get an intern to play this role for you if you don't have anybody else in there. We love interns, and we hire them. They become full-time parts of our company, but they are, it's kind of like, we talk about this all the time. If you were a one-speed bicycle and you're just pedaling as fast as you can, pedaling faster is not going to get you further, right? It's just going to get you tired and eventually have breakdowns. What you need is a whole nother gear, and hiring that next person is like adding a second gear. But when you add that second gear, not any gear will do. Okay, that we need a gear. If you added like the second gear, or if you added gear 10 on a 10 speed without the gears in between, that's a problem, right? It's not gonna get you the results you want. Or if you add a gear that just didn't have all the teeth yet that it needs to actually function well in that role, like they don't have licenses, they've never done the job, right? They've never held any kind of role close to what that role it is you're asking them to do. There's a lot of growing up that needs to happen there, and you don't want to hire a project. And I have done that. I've hired a project. They're like, hey, they're nice. They need a job. I need a person. Put them in there, and you wonder why you're not getting the results. Well, they've never done that job. So hiring, and here's the problem: is people say, but gosh, those people cost more, right? Well, do they? Because you're going to pay either way. You're going to pay because you had to pay a little bit more to get a really good person with experience in that role, or you're going to pay because you put somebody in there that didn't have all their teeth, and you're going to pay in time, in opportunity, in money, in frustration, and maybe in having to fire somebody that you didn't do the due diligence to make sure they were a good fit to begin with. The other thing we love, Justin, is doing the Colby and Working Genius, these assessments on how you naturally like to seize opportunities or solve problems, how you naturally like to work. And there is certain people that with their working, if you put what my working genius is, which is discernment and invention, and if you needed me to be an executive assistant, I can do it, right? Because you can manufacture anything, energy around anything for a while, but I'm going to hate it long term. I'm going to burn out. I'm not going to like it, and I'm not going to ultimately end up doing a great job. But if there is a makeup for that, tenacity and enablement, if you get somebody that's got tenacity and enablement and they've done this role already, they're probably going to be pretty good at that executive assistant, um, service and new business role. I mean, that's a great energy fit for that role. So making sure you're testing them, and that what have they actually done? Not there's some people interview really well, but you ask them the questions like, "Hey, so what did you do like in your last role? Have you done this work? Are you licensed?" And because there's plenty of people out there licensed that have done this work that are looking for a great place to be. So I think that then when it comes to as good as we are at the front end of things, trying to get all those things right. And usually if we skip a step, this that sneaks up on us. So we try not to skip any steps. But let's say you got someone in there, then giving them clarity over what does wild success look like here over the next month, 2 months, 6 months, especially when somebody's brand new. For you to be great at this role, here's what I'm expecting you to be doing in here. And so you've got to decide, if I was showing up and I had a great service and new business person, an executive assistant, what are they doing? Like, what do I say, man? I'm so glad they're here. I'm so glad that they're a part of this team. Because it becomes really apparent if they're not. So most of the time these days, Justin, we make that pretty clear for those types of roles when they're coming in. Here's what we expect. And then at month one, if things aren't going well, everybody knows, and we have a conversation about it. We say, "Hey, how do you think you're doing? Where do you think you're struggling?" And now let me tell you where I think I'm seeing some areas of struggle. And sometimes it's little things. Like, I'll give you an example. We've had people that were doing the role fine, but their standards of behavior, their standards of response, were not the same of ours. It didn't mean they were wrong. It just means it wasn't wild success, in my opinion. Meaning they'd get an email to say, "Hey, can you do this and this for me?" from a client, and they may even start doing that thing, start working on it, and then a day goes by and 2 days go by, and the client's going, it's like being left unread, right? They're like, "Are they working on it? So when I ask them to do something, I need to follow up with them on it?" Or if I ask them, "Hey, can you do these things?" Even if they're doing that thing. Whereas, like, hey, standard is a response. One area that you really could use some polish is just send an email right back saying, "Hey, absolutely, we'll get that taken care of. I'll start looking into that right now or tomorrow or whatever you're going to look into it. And I will get back with you by Thursday with a status update." Even if you don't know if you're going to have it done yet, right? You just let them know. Don't leave them open. And that little tweak, it was just, they didn't have that ethic in them. They're, "Oh, I didn't even think about that. I didn't think." So there's some things like that, but otherwise you sit there and you seethe and you're angry about it, but you've never taught them. You've never said, "Hey," now hopefully if you've hired somebody that's done this role well, a lot of this you're not having to train in, right? But if you hire somebody right out of college or somebody, that's just not done things that way, you need to let them know, "Here's how we do it here. Here's how we expect it to be done here." But let's say all that, and they're still not, and you're letting them know, "Hey, look, this is what needs to happen over the next 3 months or 1 month. And I'm going to let you know weekly how I feel like you're doing. And I need you to be checking in with me." And usually, Justin, by that point, two things happen. Some people self-select out. They just go, "Man, I'm not making it here." And they go, I think it's better for me to transition to another job." And those are the easiest, right? Because you don't have to have any hard conversations. Then some people are just oblivious, even with all of that, telling them all those things. So the conversation usually goes something like this: "Hey, we've had several conversations about this, and it doesn't look like it's getting better at the pace we need it to get better. So we'll give you a couple of options. If you feel like you can be at this point in the next 2 weeks, then we will still continue to try this until it doesn't, we don't see this thing moving forward. Or you can go ahead and resign, and we'll go ahead and pay you for the next couple weeks." That's what we generally do. And just go start looking for a better fit, because if you can't feel like it's going well for you, and or, in 2 weeks we'll terminate you if this hasn't gotten better. And those always stink. I hate having them because it means, one, did we blow something up with front? But sometimes, as much as you try, you just can't. But you need to be direct with people. And again, when you do have to actually fire, most people resign. Most people resign in that meeting when we set it up that way. But in some cases, it's like they go all the way, and I say, okay, so the way I would say it, don't beat around the bush, and also don't say things that aren't true. So don't say I have bad news, because it's really not bad news for you, because they don't need to be a part of the organization anymore. And it's probably not bad news for them, because they're not working out well here. And it's probably they're feeling that. But you say, hey, I have news you're not going to like. We are going to terminate your position, because where we need you to be, the progress is not taking place. And here are some examples of where that's happened. We wish you well anywhere you go. And that's it. And here's the inventory of equipment you have that we need to get back, and all those kind of things. So, but that's it. So I would say we don't have to do it a lot. And these days, just our organizational structure, most of the time, that's going to be like the chief of staff, like Stephanie, that's handling those, or if it's a direct report for someone else, it's going to be their responsibility to make that happen. So, but I hope you don't get real like a lot of reps with it. But when you have to do it, that's a good way to do it.
Well, I appreciate it. Unfortunately, it's going to be all the time we have for today. We do have a few other questions. So I think what we'll do is we'll try to make this a more normal part of our cadence. So we encourage you that are listening to, if you have any questions, there should be a link in the show notes. You can go on our website, send us your feedback, send us questions. I know one of the ones I really want to get to and was excited about, hoping we're going to get to today, but we for sure will next time, is talking about what are the new opportunities for growth that we're seeing on the horizon and things that are coming, given technology, the industry, and just kind of the current makeup of things. So I'll be excited, but we'd love to hear from you. Any questions that you guys have, please send them our way. And if this has piqued your interest on any of the other information we have, I highly encourage you to go to westyounglive.com. You can click through the link in the show notes or go direct. There's a ton more resources there. So thank you all for listening. We'll see you and listen to you, or hopefully you listen to us next time.